Sideways Stories from Wayside School by Louis Sacker, published by Scholastic Incorporated. Reading level, DRA level 38, guided reading level P. Chapter 8, Myron. Myron had big ears. He was elected class president. The children of Mrs. Jewell's class expected him to be a good president. Other presidents were good speakers. Myron was even better. He was a good listener. But he had a problem. He didn't know what a class president was supposed to do. So he asked, "What am I supposed to do?" "It's a difficult job," said Mrs. Jewell, "but you can do it. You must turn the lights on every morning and turn them off at the end of the day." "What?" asked Myron. "As a class president, you must learn to listen," said Mrs. Jewell. "I'll repeat myself only one more time. You must turn the lights on every morning." "I heard you the first time," said Myron. "It just doesn't sound like much of a job." "It certainly is," said Mrs. Jewell. "Without light I can't teach, and the children can't learn. Only you can give us that light. I think it's a very important job." "I guess so," said Myron. He wasn't convinced. "Here, let me show you how to work a light switch," said Mrs. Jewell. "I already know how," said Myron. "I've been turning lights on and off all my life." "Very good," said Mrs. Jewell. "You'll make a fine president." Myron wanted to be the best president ever, but it was such an easy job he thought that anybody could do it. When school let out that day, Myron stayed behind. He turned the lights by flickering the light switch down. "Excellent," said Mrs. Jewell. On his way home, Myron heard a horrible noise. First there was a loud screeching, then a sharp squeal, a roaring engine, and then the very faint sound of a girl crying. Myron ran over to see what had happened. Dana was bent over in the middle of the road. "What's the matter?" asked Myron. "My dog Pugsy was hit by a car," Dana cried. "Who did it?" asked Myron. "I don't know," Dana sobbed. "They sped away." "Well, that's not important," said Myron. "We've got to try to save Pugsy." Pugsy lay unconscious in the street. Myron carefully picked her up. He carried her 2 miles to the vet. Dana cried at his side. "Don't worry, Dana," said Myron. "She'll be all right." But he wasn't really so sure. He gave Pugsy to the vet, walked Dana home, then walked home himself. Dana was so upset that she forgot to thank him. Myron didn't mind. He thought that was what being class president was all about. The next morning, before he went to school, Myron went to Dana's house. Pugsy was there. She seemed all right. Dana petted her. Pugsy licked her face. "See, Myron, she's all right," said Dana. "The vet said that you brought her in just in time." "Hi, Pugsy," said Myron. He petted her. Pugsy bit his hand. "I guess she doesn't know you," said Dana. "She was unconscious yesterday when you saved her life." Dana's mother put some medicine and a Band-Aid on Myron's hand. Then she drove the children to school. They were late. They ran up the stairs to Mrs. Jewell's class. The room was completely dark. "It's about time you got here, Myron," said Mrs. Jewell. "We have no lights." "Why didn't somebody else just turn them on?" asked Myron. "Because you're class president," said Mrs. Jewell. "Show Stephen how to work the lights. From now on, he will be class president." Myron showed Stephen how to turn on the lights. He flicked the switch up. At the end of the day, Myron showed Stephen how to turn the lights off. He flicked the switch down. After a week, Stephen finally caught on. He made a good president. The lights were on every morning. Myron, who was president for only a day, was the best president in the history of Wayside School. It was just that nobody knew it. Chapter 9, Marissa. Marissa liked ice cream. She was sweet and pretty and could beat up any boy in Mrs. Jewell's class. Everybody liked Marissa, except Kathy, but then she didn't like anybody. Marissa only liked ice cream. Every day Marissa brought an ice cream cone to school and kept it in her desk until lunchtime. At first she brought chocolate ice cream every day, but she soon tired of chocolate ice cream, so she started bringing vanilla, but she got tired of vanilla too. Then she got tired of strawberry, fudge ripple, butter pecan, pistachio, and burgundy cherry, in that order. And then a terrible thing happened. Marissa got tired of ice cream. By that time her desk was a mess and everything in it was sticky. Everybody liked Marissa, but Marissa didn't like anything. Mrs. Jewell hated to see Marissa unhappy. "I don't understand it, Mrs. Jewell," cried Marissa. "There just aren't any good flavors anymore." So Mrs. Jules worked all night. The next day she brought in a new flavor of ice cream from Marissa. It was Marissa flavored ice cream. Everybody will like it, thought Mrs. Jules, because everybody likes Marissa. Here you are, Marissa, said Mrs. Jules. Marissa flavored ice cream. Everybody gathered around as Marissa tasted it. They hoped she'd like it. Marissa took a lick. Well? Asked Mrs. Jules. Marissa took another lick. Well? Asked the class. This ice cream has no taste, said Marissa. It doesn't taste bad, but it doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste like anything at all. Mrs. Jules was heartbroken. Here, let me try it, said Todd. He tasted it. You're crazy, Marissa, he said. This is the best ice cream I've ever eaten. Try some, Dee Dee. It's delicious, said Dee Dee. It's so sweet and creamy. She passed it around the room. Oh, it's so good, said Leslie. I think it tastes terrible, said Kathy. I don't understand it, said Marissa. I don't taste a thing. Mrs. Jules slapped herself in the face. Oh, I've made a big mistake, Marissa. Of course you can't taste anything. It's Marissa flavored ice cream. It's the same thing you taste. Always when you're not tasting anything at all. So the next day, Mrs. Jules brought in Joe flavored ice cream. Marissa liked it, so did everybody else. Joe thought it had no taste. Everybody liked Marissa. Marissa only liked Joe. The following day, Mrs. Jules brought in Ron flavored ice cream. Ron thought it had no taste, but everybody else loved it. Everybody liked Marissa. Marissa only liked Joe and Ron. By the end of the month, Mrs. Jules had brought in 27 new flavors of ice cream, one for each member of the class. Everybody liked Marissa, and Marissa liked everybody. They all tasted so good. All except Kathy, that is. Kathy flavored ice cream tasted a little bit like old bologna. Everyone still agreed that Marissa flavored ice cream was the best, except Marissa. She liked hot ice cream the best. This turned out to be a problem. Every once in a while, Marissa would try to take a bite out of Todd's arm in order to get that very special flavor. Chapter 10. Paul. Paul had the best seat in Mrs. Jules' class. He sat in the back of the room. It was the seat that was the furthest away from Mrs. Jules. Mrs. Jules was teaching the class about fractions. She drew a picture of a pie on the blackboard. She cut the pie into 8 pieces. She explained that each piece was 1/8 of the pie. Paul never paid attention. He didn't see the picture of the pie. He didn't see anything. Well, he did see one thing. Actually, he saw 2 things. He saw Leslie's 2 pigtails. Leslie sat in front of Paul. She had 2 long brown pigtails that reached all the way down to her waist. Paul saw those pigtails, and a terrible urge came over him. He wanted to pull a pigtail. He wanted to wrap his fist around it, feel the hair between his fingers, and just yank. He thought it would also be fun to tie the pigtails together, or, better yet, tie them to her chair. But most of all, he just wanted to pull one. Slowly he reached for the one on the right. No! What am I doing? He thought. I'll only get into trouble. Paul had it made. He sat in the back of the room. He paid no attention to anybody, and nobody paid any attention to him. But if he pulled a pigtail, it would be all over. Leslie would tell on him, and he'd become the center of attention. He sighed and slowly withdrew his arm. But Paul couldn't ignore those pigtails. There they were, dangling right in front of him, just begging to be pulled. He could close his eyes, but he couldn't make the pigtails disappear. He could still smell them and hear them. He could almost taste them. Maybe just a little tug, he thought. No, none. There they hung, easily within his reach. Well, let them just hang there, thought Paul. It would be foolish to pull one, no matter how tempting they were. None of the other children in the class pulled pigtails. Why should he? Of course, none of the other children sat behind Leslie either. It was just a simple matter of being able to think clearly. That was all. Paul thought it over and decided not to pull one. It was as simple as that. Suddenly his arm shot forward. He grabbed Leslie's right pigtail and yanked. Yeah! Screamed Leslie. Everybody looked at her. Paul pulled my pigtail, she said. They all looked at Paul. I couldn't help it, said Paul. You'd better learn to help it, said Mrs. Jules. She wrote Paul's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Tell Leslie you're sorry. I'm sorry, Leslie, said Paul. Said Leslie. Paul felt horrible. Never again would he pull another pigtail. Except there was one problem. He still wasn't satisfied. He had pulled the right one, but that wasn't enough. He wanted to pull the left one, too. It was as if he heard a little voice coming from the pigtail saying, "Pull me, Paul, pull me." "I can't," Paul answered. "My name's already on the blackboard under the word discipline." "Big deal," said the pigtail. "Pull me." "No way," said Paul. "Never again." "Aw, come on, Paul, just a little tug," urged the pigtail. "What harm could it do?" "Lots of harm," said Paul. "Leslie will scream and I'll get in trouble again." "Boy, that's not fair," whined the pigtail. "You pulled the right one, now it's my turn." "I know, but I can't," said Paul. "Sure you can," said the pigtail. "Just grab me and yank." "No," said Paul, "it's not right." "Sure it is, Paul," said the pigtail. "Pigtails are meant to be pulled. That's what we're here for." "Tell that to Leslie," said Paul. "Leslie won't mind," said the pigtail. "I promise." "I bet," said Paul, just like she didn't mind the last time. "You just didn't pull hard enough," said the pigtail. "Leslie likes us pulled real hard." "Really?" asked Paul. "Cross my heart," said the pigtail. "The harder the better." "Okay," said Paul, "but if you're lying—" "I promise," said the pigtail. Paul grabbed the left pigtail. It felt good in his hand. He pulled as hard as he could. "Yeah!" screamed Leslie. Mrs. Jules asked, "Paul, did you pull Leslie's pigtail again?" "No," said Paul. "I pulled the other one." All the children laughed. "Are you trying to be funny?" asked Mrs. Jules. "No," said Paul. "I was trying to be fair. I couldn't pull one and not the other." The children laughed again. "Pigtails are meant to be pulled," Paul concluded. Mrs. Jules put a check next to Paul's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. But at last Paul was satisfied. True, his name was on the blackboard with a check next to it. But that really didn't matter. All he had to do was stay out of trouble the rest of the day, and his name would be erased. It's easy to stay out of trouble when you have the best seat in the class. In fact, Paul could do this every day. He could pull Leslie's pigtail twice and then stay out of trouble the rest of the day. There was nothing less he could do about it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Leslie screamed, "Yeah!" Mrs. Jules circled Paul's name and sent him home early on the kindergarten bus. Nobody would believe that he hadn't pulled Leslie's pigtail again.